بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. Assalamu alaikum, dear brothers and sisters, wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to another episode of After the Prophet, brought to you by the Ahlul Bayt American Society and Tasneem Institute. So in our last two episodes, we examined a number of reports that are found in Sunni sources that describe for us the threat that was made against the house of Ali and Fatima after Ali had refused to pay allegiance, and also the escalation of that threat. We looked at some of the violent encounters that took place at the house of Ali and Fatima, all per the reports that we found in the reports of Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Now, what I'd like to do in this episode is I want to examine what the Shia sources say, because the Shia sources go into a little bit more detail. But before we do that, it's important for us to address, what I call the mental block when it comes to this particular issue. For many Muslims, it's hard to conceive, it's hard to imagine that the daughter of the Prophet ﷺ was attacked. The argument is that how could such a thing happen? How could the companions of the Prophet, who love the Prophet, who respect the Prophet, violate the sanctity of his daughter through a physical altercation, through physical violence? Now, it's important for us to keep in mind that the likelihood of Sayyidah Fatima alayhi salam being harmed during the events after the Prophet's death is actually supported by multiple historical indicators. We have to remember, brothers and sisters, that when you look at the context, the contextual evidence and the circumstances highlight that not only was an attack plausible, but it was actually expected given the circumstances. Now, what do we mean by this? To understand how we reach this conclusion that Sayyidah Fatima alayhi salam was attacked, you simply have to look at four key factors. Number one, the refusal of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam to pay allegiance to Abu Bakr. Now, as we mentioned, Ali ibn Abi Talib is not an ordinary person. His refusal to pay allegiance to Abu Bakr essentially functions as a direct challenge to the new political order. Ali ibn Abi Talib is the head of Ahlul Bayt. He is the most prominent person in the Ummah. So his refusal of bay'ah puts a question mark on the legitimacy of this new government. And hence, what you see is that Abu Bakr and Umar, they understood that this was a significant threat to their legitimacy, and this had to be dealt with swiftly and decisively. So, number one, Ali and the Hashemites, along with other prominent companions, they refrain from giving bay'ah. Number two, in response to Ali's refusal, the government of Abu Bakr resorted to threats, as we saw in our previous episodes. We have a number of reports that indicate that Umar ibn al-Khattab brings firewood and threatens to burn down the house of Fatima alayhi salam if those who are inside do not comply. And eventually, the house was stormed in an attempt to force Ali ibn Abi Talib into submission. Number three, so again, we're looking at the factors that highlight that violence against Sayyidah Fatima alayhi salam was not just probable, but it was expected given the circumstances. Number three,
physical confrontation in the house of Ali and Fatima. Ali ibn Abi Talib did not voluntarily come out of the house. So when Ali refuses to come out, they ended up entering by force. Some of the historical accounts describe them dragging Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam out of the house, apprehending him, tying him in rope. And all of this indicates that a physical altercation took place in the house. And this obviously is going to raise the possibility that Sayyidah Fatima alayhi salam was harmed in the process. And then we come to our fourth factor, and that is that the main assailant, the individual who is leading this raid on the house of Sayyidah Fatima, is Umar ibn al-Khattab. Umar ibn al-Khattab has a history of violence against women. Usually when a crime is committed or there's an allegation of a crime, law enforcement typically does what? They look into the criminal background of the suspect. Now, when we look at Umar ibn al-Khattab, we notice a couple of things. Number one, if you look at his conversion story, and we had an entire episode on this in our Life of Prophet Muhammad series. If you look at the episode on the conversion of Umar ibn al-Khattab, his conversion story tells us that he first discovers, he had intended to kill the Prophet, and as he's going to assassinate the Prophet, someone tells him, you look angry, where are you going? And he says that I'm going to kill Muhammad. And the narrator, the individual, says that you need to sort out your own house. Your sister has converted to Islam. So in that narration, before Umar's conversion, he actually beats his sister. Right? Now someone might argue, well, that was before his conversion to Islam. And Islam wipes away our past transgressions. Al-Islamu yajubbu ma qabla. Islam wipes away the past. Now the problem with that is, yes, we agree, Islam wipes away the past. But his violence against women is actually well documented even after his conversion to Islam. I'll give you one example just so we have an understanding that we're not dealing with someone who is known for his gentleness with women. The following incident that I'm going to share with you is reported in a number of sources. Tarikh al-Tabari mentions this, Ibn Sa'd in his Tabaqat al-Kubra, Ibn al-Athir in Jami' al-Usul, Muttaqi al-Hindi in Kanz al-Ummal. Among other sources, we find the following riwayah. The narration says, لما توفي أبو بكر, when Abu Bakr passed away, أقامت عليه عائشة النوح. Aisha, she basically holds a gathering to mourn the death of her father. فأقبل عمر بن الخطاب حتى قام ببابها. News reaches Umar that there is a majlis for Abu Bakr, a majlis of mourning. Umar, he comes to the door of Aisha. فنهاهن عن البكاء على أبي بكر. He forbade them from weeping over Abu Bakr. In Umar's eyes, this is not allowed. This is not permissible. فَأَبَيْنَ أَن يَنْتَهِينَ. But the women who were in the house of Aisha, who were mourning Abu Bakr, they refused to stop. فَقَالَ عُمَرْ لِهِشَامِ بْنِ الْوَلِيدِ. Umar says to Hisham ibn al-Walid, أُدْخُلْ فَأَخْرِجْ إِلَيَّ ابْنَةَ أَبِي قُحَافَةَ أُخْتَ أَبِي بَكْرٍ. He says to Walid, Hisham ibn Walid, enter and bring out to me the daughter of Abu Quhafa, the sister of Abu Bakr, the aunt of Aisha. فقالت عائشة لهشام حين سمعت ذلك من عمر إني أحرج عليك بيتي. When Aisha hears that Umar is going to enter her home, she says, I forbid you from entering my house. فقال عمر لهشام ادخل فقد أذنت لك. Umar ignores Aisha. She says, I don't permit you to enter my home. Umar says to Hisham, I give you permission to go in. So he enters the house of Aisha without permission. فدخل هشام. Hisham goes in. فأخرج فروة أخت أبي بكر إلى عمر. He basically drags out Farwa. Who's Farwa? She is the sister of Abu Bakr, the sister of the former Khalifa. فعلاها بالدرة فضربها ضربات. The narration says what? Umar, he struck her with his dirra. Dirra means a whip. He struck her with a whip, hitting her several times. This is a narration. This is not a riwayah from Bihar al-Anwar. No, this is found in a number of Sunni sources. Umar ibn al-Khattab strikes the sister of Abu Bakr, Farwa, multiple times. فَتَفَرَّقَ النَّوْحُ حِينَ سَمِعُوا ذَلِكَ. After people saw that Umar had hit the sister of Abu Bakr, the gathering dispersed. The majlis basically ended. Now question. The sister of Abu Bakr was crying over her brother. She did not pose a political threat to Umar. She was the sister of his friend. But she did something that he did not approve of. And he physically struck her. If Umar ibn al-Khattab strikes the sister of Abu Bakr for crying over her brother, and she was not a prominent person in the sense that, she was doing something that would undermine his khilafah, what do you think would be justified in the eyes of Umar ibn al-Khattab if a woman poses a political threat to him? So the fourth factor is the assailant. The suspect in this crime is someone who has a history of attacking women, of striking women. So people need to understand that this is not something that is far-fetched, that in the heat of the moment there is a physical attack on Sayyidah Fatima alayhi salam, especially when we are dealing with a home that represents the strongest political resistance against the government of Abu Bakr. Now with that said, now that we've established that not only is it probable, but it's expected. This is exactly what we expect given these circumstances and these factors that we mentioned. That Ali refuses allegiance, that he refuses to come out of the house. There's a threat, right? Ali does not come out of the house. There are narrations that establish that there was forced entry. And Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam, the daughter of the Prophet, represents one of the main political opponents. And the main assailant, the one who is trying to extract this bay'ah from Ali, he has a history of violence against women. So why is it hard to believe that Sayyidah Fatima alayhi salam was attacked during this raid? Now we come to the narrations that we have in Shia sources. And I'll just mention a few of them. We have over 24 narrations from the Ma'sumeen, from the infallible Imams, where they speak about the attack on Sayyidah Fatima alayhi salam herself. And yes, not every single narration is reliable in terms of its isnad. But when you have that many reports with different chains of transmission, it gives you a level of certainty that, yes, we might not know the details, but without a doubt, there was an assault on the daughter of the Prophet. When you look at all of the evidence, you would have to be stubborn to deny that this unfortunate tragedy took place against the daughter of the Prophet. So we look at the first narration. Sheikh As-Saduq, rahmatullahi alayh, he mentions a narration in his Amali, Amal As-Saduq, where the Prophet essentially speaks about what will befall his Ahlul Bayt after his death. So the Prophet mentions, it's a very lengthy narration, and then he gets to the part where he speaks about what will happen to his daughter Fatima. He says, كَأَنِّي بِهَا وَقَدْ دَخَلَ الذُّلُّ بَيْتَهَا. It is as if I see her now. Humiliation has entered her home. وَانْتُهِكَتْ حُرْمَتُهَا. Her sanctity has been violated. وَغُصِبَتْ حَقُّهَا. And her rights have been usurped. وَمُنِعَتْ إِرْثُهَا. And her inheritance denied. وَكُسِرَ جَنْبُهَا. And her side broken, her rib broken. وَهِيَ تُنَادِي يَا مُحَمَّدًا. While she cries out, O Muhammad, O my father. فَلَا تُجَابْ. But she receives no answer. وَتَسْتَغِيثُ فَلَا تُغَاث. She seeks help, but no one helps her. فَلَا تَزَالُ بَعْدِي مَحْزُونَةً مَكْرُوبَةً بَاكِيَةً. From that moment on, she remains sorrowful, distressed, and weeping. تتذكر انقطاع الوحي عن بيتها مرة وتتذكر فراقي أخرى. Sometimes she mourns the end of revelation in her home, and at other times she grieves over my separation. وتستوحش إذا جنها الليل لفقد صوت الذي كانت تستمع إليه إذا تهجدت بالقرآن. And the Prophet says, and she feels, it's as if I can see her now in that state of deep loneliness when night falls. At nighttime she would become extremely depressed because she would miss my voice reciting the Quran when I do my tahajjud, when I pray Salatul Layl. ثم ترى نفسها ذليلة بعد أن كانت في أيام أبيها عزيزة. And then she sees herself disrespected after having been honored and dignified during the days of her father. Salamullahi alayha. Peace and blessings be upon Sayyidah Fatima alayhi salam, the oppressed, al-mazluma. So this is the narration where the Prophet is foretelling, he's prophesying the tragedies that will befall his daughter. This is the riwayah in the Amali of Sheikh As-Saduq. A second narration is what Sheikh al-Tabrasi mentions, and Sheikh al-Tabrasi died in 599 after the Hijrah. He's another Tabrasi, he's not the author of Majma' al-Bayan, he's another scholar. In his book Kitab al-Ihtijaj, he reports a narration from Imam al-Hasan. Right? What's incredible is that almost all of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, they spoke and they commented about the oppression of Sayyidah Fatima alayhi salam, particularly the violence that she endured. In this narration, Imam al-Hasan speaks to al-Mughira ibn Shu'bah, who was one of the thugs who ambushed the house of Sayyidah Fatima alayhi salam. Imam al-Hasan, he says to him, وَأَنْتَ الَّذِي ضَرَبْتَ فَاطِمَةَ بِنْتَ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ حَتَّى أَدْمَيْتَهَا. Allahu Akbar. He says, and you, O Mughira, you are the one who struck Fatima, the daughter of the Messenger of God, until you caused her to bleed. This is they were attacking her like she was a man. He struck her until he caused her to bleed. وَأَلْقَتْ مَا فِي بَطْنِهَا. Right? And she miscarried her child. استدلالا منك لرسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله. And you did this. Look at the delusion. You did this claiming to support the messenger of God. وَمُخَالَفَةً مِنْكَ لِأَمْرٍ. But in reality you were opposing the command of the messenger of God. وَقَدْ قَالَ وَانْتِهَاكًا لِحُرْمَتِهِ. And you violated the sanctity of the Prophet. When you attack Fatima, it's as if you're attacking the Prophet. وَقَدْ قَالَ لَهَا رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَآلِهِ يَا فَاطِمَةَ أَنْتِ سَيِّدَةُ نِسَاءِ أَهْلِ الْجَنَّةِ. You attacked a lady, the daughter of the Prophet, the flesh and the blood of Rasulullah, a lady to whom the Prophet said, O Fatima, you are the leader of the women of paradise. And we're supposed to believe as Muslims that the one who threatens to burn down the house of the leader of women in paradise, he's also in the highest level of Jannah. What type of religion is this? Is there no sense of haqq and batil? Is there no understanding of dhulm? Wallahi masiruka ila an-nar. Imam al-Hasan, he says to Mughira, I swear by God that your destination is the hellfire. You attack Sayyidat Nisa al-Alameen. Where does such a person go? He goes to Jannah or he goes to Jahannam? He goes to Jahannam. A third narration we have from Imam al-Sadiq. I'm just giving you a sample of the narrations that we have from our A'imma alayhimus salam regarding this tragedy. Muhammad ibn Jarir al-Tabari, who's the Shi'i, not the Sunni Tabari, who died in the end of the 4th century, he has a book known as Dala'il al-Imama. Now I know there are discussions about the authenticity of this book, but everything that I'm sharing is corroborated by other sources. I just want to show you, the mounting evidence when you just look at the sheer number of reports across generations with respect to the attack on Sayyidah Fatima. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, in this narration, it is narrated that he said, وَكَانَ سَبَبُ وَفَاتِهَا. What was the cause of her death? There are some who say, she cried until she died, and that's it. She just died of grief. Or she died of some mysterious illness. Imam al-Sadiq, he says, وَكَانَ سَبَبُ وَفَاتِهَا أَنَّ قُنْفُذًا مَوْلَى عُمَرْ لَكَزَهَا بِنَعْلِ السَّيْفِ بِأَمْرِهِ. The cause of her death was that Qunfudh, the servant of Umar, struck her with the hilt of a sword on his orders. These were the orders of Umar ibn al-Khattab. فَأَسْقَطَتْ مُحَسِّنًا. She miscarried her child. This child, her fetus, who was given a name. His name was Muhassin. You have Hassan, Hussein, and the fetus of Sayyidah Fatima was Muhassin. وَمَرِضَتْ مِنْ ذَلِكَ مَرَضًا شَدِيدًا. And she became severely ill because of that attack. وَلَمْ تَدَعْ أَحَدًا مِمَّنْ آذَاهَا يَدْخُلُ عَلَيْهَا. And she did not allow anyone who harmed her to enter upon her thereafter. This is why she wanted to be buried at night. She did not want any of these criminals to attend her funeral. A fourth narration that we have from Imam Musa al-Kadhim alayhi salam. You see, these narrations are mentioned by multiple Imams of Ahlul Bayt. And again, at this point, when you have this many narrations, it doesn't matter. The chain of transmission is not important. Even if you have tens of weak narrations, it still raises the probability, the likelihood that this incident indeed took place. Al-Majlisi, rahmatullahi alayhi, in Bihar al-Anwar, he reports the following narration from Imam al-Kadhim, our 7th Imam. Imam al-Kadhim, he talks about the wasiyah of the Prophet. The Prophet, he mentioned the oppression that his family would face, and then he comes to his daughter Fatima. He says the following about his daughter Fatima. أَلَا إِنَّ فَاطِمَةَ بَابَهَا بَابِي وَبَيْتَهَا بَيْتِي. The Prophet says, indeed, Fatima, her door is my door. SubhanAllah. The Prophet mentions the door. It's as if, of course the Prophet didn't know. Allah gave him this knowledge of the unseen. Indeed, Fatima, her door is my door, and her house is my house. فَمَنْ هَتَكَهُ فَقَدْ هَتَكَ حِجَابَ اللَّهِ. So whoever violates it, whoever violates this door, whoever violates this house, in reality he has violated the sanctity of God. قال Isa, the narrator, he says, as Imam al-Kadhim was narrating the words of the Prophet, فَبَكَى أَبُو الْحَسَنِ عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامِ طَوِيلًا وَقَطَعَ بَقِيَّةَ كَلَامِهِ. Imam al-Kadhim, he started to cry. He started to shed tears. He was overcome with grief and pain, so much so that he could not continue speaking. He could not continue his words. And he cried out, هُتِكَ وَاللَّهِ حِجَابُ اللَّهِ هُتِكَ وَاللَّهِ حِجَابُ اللَّهِ هُتِكَ وَاللَّهِ حِجَابُ اللَّهِ. He said, by God, the sanctity of God was violated. He repeats it 3 times. By God, the sanctity of God was violated. And then he says, Ya Ummah, O my mother, salawatullahi alayha. This was how Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam spoke about Sayyidah Fatima, that the hijab of God, the sanctity of God was violated. That indicates that something terrible happened to Sayyidah Fatima alayhi salam. And then we have a narration again in Dala'il al-Imama from a statement from Imam al-Jawad. Zakaria ibn Adam, who was one of the companions of Imam al-Ridha alayhi salam, he says, Inni la'inda al-Ridha. I was once in the presence of Imam al-Ridha, إذ جيء بأبي جعفر وسنه أقل من 4 سنين. Zakaria ibn Adam, he says, I was sitting with Imam al-Ridha alayhi salam, and Imam al-Jawad was brought into the room, and he was less than 4 years old. فَضَرَبَ بِيَدِهِ إِلَى الْأَرْضِ. He put his hand on the ground. وَرَفَعَ رَأْسَهُ إِلَى السَّمَاءِ. And then he looked up at the sky. The 3-year-old Imam al-Jawad. فَأَطَالَ الْفِكْرِ. And then he started to think. It was as if he was engrossed in deep thought. فَقَالَ لَهُ الرِّضَى بِنَفْسِي أَنْتَ لِمَنْ أَطَالَ فِكْرُكَ. Imam al-Ridha says to his son, may my life be sacrificed for you. What are you thinking about? Why do you look like you're in deep thought? فَقَالَ عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامِ فِيمَا صُنِعَ بِأُمِّي فَاطِمَةِ. I am reflecting on what was done to my mother, Fatima. And then the hadith continues where he speaks about the punishment that will be given to her oppressors, which highlights that what happened to her is something that is beyond what we can imagine. Where Imam al-Jawad, as a young child, is sitting there thinking about what his great-grandmother endured. Now, in addition, as we said, we have over 24 narrations from our A'imma alayhimus salam. More than that. Now, in addition to the words of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt and the Prophet, we also have narrations from some of the prominent companions who were eyewitnesses to the attack. Salman al-Farisi was an eyewitness, Az-Zubayr was an eyewitness, and Abdullah ibn Abbas. In Kitab Sulayb ibn Qais al-Hilali, Ibn Abbas, he reports the attack in detail. And we'll conclude with this. He says, فَانْطَلَقَ قُنْفُذٌ فَأَخْبَرَ أَبَا بَكْرٍ. Qunfudh went and informed Abu Bakr. He informed him that, listen, Ali is refusing to give bay'ah. He's not going to give you allegiance. فَوَثَبَ عُمَرُ غَضْبَانَ فَنَادَى خَالِدَ بْنَ الْوَلِيدِ وَقُنْفُذَا. Umar stood up angrily and he called for Khalid ibn al-Walid and Qunfudh. فَأَمَرَهُمَا أَن يَحْمِلَا حَطَبًا وَنَارًا. He commanded them to bring firewood and fire. So this is consistent with all of the reports that we've seen so far. ثُمَّ أَقْبَلَ حَتَّى انْتَهَى إِلَى بَابِ عَلِي. Umar then comes to the door of Ali. وَفَاطِمَةُ قَاعِدَةٌ خَلْفَ الْبَابِ. And Fatima is sitting behind the door. قَدْ عَصَبَتْ رَأْسَهَا. her head was wrapped. وَنَحَلَ جِسْمُهَا فِي وَفَاةِ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ. She became thin and weak due to the death of the Prophet. She was in deep sorrow. فَأَقْبَلَ عُمَرُ حَتَّى ضَرَبَ الْبَابِ. Umar came and he struck the door. ثُمَّ نَادَى أَيْنَ ابن أبي طالب. He says, يَا ابْنَ أبي طالب, O son of Abu Talib, افتح الباب. O Ali, open up the door. فقالت فاطمة عليه السلام يا عمر ما لنا ولك دعنا وما نحن فيه. O Umar, what do you want from us? Leave us to our grief. قال افتح الباب وإلا أحرقناه عليكم. Umar responds saying, open the door or I will burn it down on you. فقالت Fatima, she says to Umar, يا عمر أما تتق الله عز وجل. Oh Umar, don't you fear God? تدخل على بيتي وتهجم على داري. You enter my house, you forcefully attack my house. فأبى أن ينصرف. Fatima, she tries to turn him away. He refuses to leave. ثم دعا عمر بالنار. Umar then, he called for fire. فأضرمها في الباب. And he set the door on fire. فأحرق الباب. ثم دفعه عمر. Then Umar, he basically pushed the door open. He kicked the door open. فاستقبلته فاطمة. Fatima was there at the door when he broke it down. Fatima cried out, وصاحت يا أبتاه يا رسول الله. فرفع السيف وهو في غمده. He raised his sword while it was in its sheath. فوجأ به جنبها. And he struck her with the back of the sword. فصرخت, and she cried out. فرفع الصوت, and then he raised his whip. فضرب به ذراعها, and he struck her arm with it. فصاحت يا أبتاه, and she cried out, "O my father." Now someone may say, usually our opponents, what do they say? They say, "Oh, you believe this happened? Where was Ali ibn Abi Talib? Ali is just going to sit back and watch?" The narration continues. فوثب علي بن أبي طالب فأخذ بتلابيب عمر. We don't believe Ali ibn Abi Talib sat back, no. Then Ali ibn Abi Talib leaped up. It was a sudden attack. He leaped up, he seized Umar by his collar. ثم هزه فصرعه. He shook him and he violently threw him to the ground. ووجأ أنفه ورقبته. He struck his nose and his neck. وهم بقتله. And Ali was about to kill him. فذكر رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله. And then Ali, in that moment, he remembered the Prophet. وما أوصى به من الصبر والطاعة. He remembered how the Prophet advised him to be patient and obedient. فقال والذي. Then Ali says to Umar and all of those who are there, والذي كرم محمدا بالنبوة. I swear by the one who honored Muhammad with prophethood. يا ابن الصهاك لولا كتاب من الله سبق. If it was not for a decree from Allah that had already been revealed, لعلمت أنك لا تدخل بيتي. You would know that you would not be able to enter my house. The Prophet did not give Ali permission to shed blood and to fight and to go to war. He said that you need a certain number of people to resist. If you don't have that number, you have to be patient. But Ali defended his wife. Ali leaped and subdued the men who were attacking his wife. And even if you look at the assassination of Uthman, which we'll speak about in future episodes, when Uthman's wife was being attacked and he did not draw his sword, he said that the reason why I'm not drawing my sword is because the Prophet told me to be patient. So we say to our brothers and sisters, our Sunni brothers and sisters, that it's if you praise Uthman for not retaliating because he was following the instructions of the Prophet, Ali was doing the same. Ali ibn Abi Talib was patiently enduring after the death of the Prophet because that's precisely what the Prophet told him to do. Inshallah, in our next episode, we'll discuss this issue further. We'll speak about the events after the attack and the tragic death of Sayyidah Fatima and how Amir al-Mu'mineen was processing this great loss. Inshallah, we'll cover that in our next episode. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.